Let's continue exploring the universe within art. I'm your host, OmLedu, and in this episode, we're going to talk about copper, how to oxidize it quickly, how to find it, and some other various tips and tricks. This was requested by Raul BPC. Thank you so much for leaving a comment and a request. I really hope that you enjoy. I've always loved copper, especially since the 1.21 editions. We're going to start off by talking about how to oxidize your copper quickly. There are 4 different stages of oxidation, ranging from completely clean to fully oxidized, and this goes for all of the variations of copper that they added in 1.21. As I'm sure we all know, it takes absolutely forever for the copper to turn fully green. Now the fastest way to make it oxidize is by placing down single blocks of copper that have 4 blocks of air in between them. The downside is that this takes up an absolute ton of space, but luckily, you don't have to rely on placing them 4 blocks apart. Even though that is the fastest way, we could still place rows or platforms. So a lot of times what I will do is have a little bit of both. I will have some that are spread out 4 blocks apart, and then others that are in rows and others that are in platforms. And because it takes so long, a lot of times I'll build this underground, under my base or my farms. So I'll place rows of torches in between the copper to prevent mobs from spawning, but also to give the copper some breathing room. Because if we turn up the random tick speed, we can see that the more air or the more non-copper blocks that there are around the copper, the faster that it will oxidize. So even with platforms, the first ones to oxidize will be the ones on the edge. After an average of 20 minutes, copper will enter the pre-oxidation stage. Once in that stage, it will then check 4 blocks in every direction for copper that is at the same or lower stage of oxidation. So it's not that the oxidation is spreading, but because as copper oxidizes, it no longer gives a penalty to copper within 4 blocks of that. So that's why having 4 blocks of air in between individual copper blocks is the fastest, or why it appears that copper is spreading. But it's actually not. We can actually test this by placing in oxidized copper in here, and we can see that it's not actually spreading from those that we placed in the middle. The reason it appears to spread from the edges is that the copper on the edges have less copper blocks surrounding it, so those have a higher chance of oxidizing after they've entered the pre-oxidation stage. Then as copper oxidizes, it lowers the penalty for the neighboring copper. When it checks to see how much copper is nearby, the penalty is lower for copper that has a higher oxidation stage. And the reason that we don't see fully oxidized blocks pop up randomly in the middle is because when a copper block enters the pre-oxidation stage, it then checks the 4 block radius for copper of a lower oxidization level. And if it finds that there is, it removes itself from the pre-oxidation stage. So that is another time limitation in regards to using rows or platforms. However, one nice thing is that not only is rows and platforms easier to harvest, but it's also easier to peel back the oxidized layers. So if you use an axe on an oxidized copper, it will peel back the oxidization, reverting it back 1 stage for every time that you hit it with your axe. So if you allow a platform to become fully oxidized, but you want lesser stages, you can just use an axe and then harvest it all. So basically, the more air that you leave in between your copper, the faster it will oxidize, up to 4 blocks of air between each block. But using rows would still be faster than clumps or platforms. Now because of how long this process takes, I'll usually build an oxidizing chamber underneath my base or underneath my farms. Somewhere that I'm going to be AFKing or be for an extended period of time. And as long as the copper is within simulation distance of a player, it will oxidize, from bedrock all the way up to build limit. So figure out where you're going to be hanging out and spending most of your time, and build an oxidizing area as soon as you get copper. That way, if you ever need it for a project, it will be there. To prevent the copper from oxidizing, we can mix the copper with some honeycomb. This will give us waxed copper. As long as copper is waxed, it will never oxidize. And if you need a good source of honeycomb, you can check out the bee farm that I just uploaded. I will link that here on the screen and in the video description. Because you will need to wax every single copper block that you want to build with if you don't want it to oxidize. Now you can also do this by hand, simply by clicking on the copper that you wish to wax while holding some honeycomb. You will need to crouch in order to wax the doors and the trapdoors. But really, It is much, much faster just to wax things in your inventory through the crafting menu than it is to wax things after you have placed them. It's also much more efficient to wax the copper blocks before you craft them into other things. And when crafting with copper, never ever ever use a crafting table. All of the copper stuff is more expensive if you use a crafting table. Like this is 4 for 4 or 1 for 1 on any of the crafting stuff. Whereas if you use a stone cutter, it's 1 for 4. So you get 4 times as many items if you use a stone cutter to craft. That's also why it's more efficient to wax the blocks of copper before you craft with them, because you're saving essentially 4 times the honeycomb if you wax the blocks before you craft with them. So just remember that stone cutter is good and crafting table is bad. Another thing that's bad is lightning. If lightning strikes your copper, it will not only de-wax it, but it will also lower the oxidation level. So if you build something out of copper and it gets hit by lightning, you will have to re-wax it as well as wait for the oxidation level to go back to where it was. So if you don't even notice that it was hit by lightning, you'll eventually end up with fully oxidized spots on your build. So try to keep lightning away from your copper. When it comes to finding copper, the ore is very abundant, but I love that now we have these trial chambers that are all over the place. They are super common and they are jam-packed with all sorts of different copper for us to harvest. But if you're looking for more copper ore, the most common place to find it is at Y level 48 and Y level 32. At Y32, you'll run into more large copper veins, big clusters of copper. But at Y48, you'll run into more copper in general, but it will be more sporadic, just a few copper here and a few copper there. So anywhere between 32 and 48. Copper is just so super cool. Let me know down in the comments what you like to build out of copper. The last thing I tried to build using it was a dragon. I wanted to build this in survival, but the realm ended before I was able to, so I never finished the creative design. But I was really excited to use the copper and the different variations to create scales and like a belly and stuff like that. I thought it went really, really well with the dragon aesthetics. But that's all we got for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe, and be sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you did or didn't like about the video, what you plan on using copper for, or if you have any questions or requests, and I will do my best to help you out. And if you don't know what to say, just tell me hi. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for watching and for your support. Always remember that you are totally awesome. I really hope to see you again soon, but until then, I've been your host, OmLedu, sharing a Minecraft trick or two, and reminding you, as always, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye!